Assalamu alaikum. I hope you're well on this Friday. I want to cover a very, very important topic, and that is the identity, the Muslim identity in particular. And why I want to address this question is that I do get the impression that a lot of you, and even myself, we could get overwhelmed by the sheer mass or explosion of Muslim ideas and websites trying to reach out to you and trying to persuade you of their thinking. Now, if you are one of those that maybe just look at the Qur'an as a primary source of guidance and would, like me, take a skeptical position on hadith, not reject it, but just be much more skeptical about it, then you will even feel frustrated that there are many people who place the Quran at the center and move hadith to the periphery, and yet cannot find some meaningful uniformity between even those people. Especially if you're a younger person and you tend to explore the internet quite a bit, then you're going to end up with people who speak more or less the language of Quran, but it's confusing because they come with different ideas, and then it becomes very tough, it becomes challenging. And I can sense that frustration in many of you. So I think I wanted to maybe just shed more light and to clear the way for you, to help you understand a bit better, because I believe that I can tell you now that I have a fairly well developed sense of identifying people who are generally moving in the right direction or generally moving into a constructive direction. And I have a fairly well developed sensor which you can also acquire to see which people are maybe leading you down the garden path. So I'm going to spend this video on enlightening, elucidating, giving you some ideas and thoughts about the Muslim identity, and to help you navigate your way through all those varying and opposing streams of thinking. Now, I've made videos on the different modern trends within Islam, but I'm going to do this more as from the perspective of identity, and I believe it's a more encompassing framework within which to discuss this particular topic. Now, what is your identity? You must have asked yourself that question. What is my identity? Who am I? I think the quickest answer to that is I am that which I hold sacred and dear. That is who I am. I project it in my appearance, I project it in my mannerisms, I project it in what I stand for, and that is me. That is what I am. I am the sum total of those things which I hold dear and sacred. I think that's the quickest way for me to answer the question. And so normally people will project in an aesthetic way, in the way they appear, in the way they dress, in the way they wear their hair. They will generally manifest aesthetically what they hold dear. And so often we say, what are you? Who are you? Partially the answer is in how you appear to me, but I think really the deeper answer to who you are, to get that answer, I need to understand what you really stand for, what you hold sacred and dear. And so that answers the question of what is identity. Now, it's a very complex question or a very complex concept, the concept of identity. Well, once you know it, then it's maybe less complicated. Like now you could ask yourself, what is your identity? After listening to me now, you can probably answer for yourself that question. Who is it that you hold sacred or dear, or what is it that you hold sacred? And very soon you will discover that there are things that you think are important, the way that your fathers taught you, the way that you've discovered by experience in life. Maybe you've learned that certain things are very off-putting, the way people treat you, and you made a conscious decision that that is not who I am, that is not who I want to be. And so that is our identity. And the identity is very important. We all have an identity. Without an identity, we are nothing. You see, if somebody calls my name Anwar, they have to think of a particular identity. They're not thinking of a body and a nose and ears. They're thinking of a container of certain values, certain principles, certain unique mannerisms. Well, aesthetically also, they see Anwar as a guy who likes food, so they know that is who Anwar is. And so you each have that same thing. Now let me take the idea further. Once I think you get the point of what is identity, right? Is that which you hold sacred, and that which you hold dear, and it is expressed in your appearance aesthetically, but also in your behavior, in your day-to-day behavior. Now, how is identity formed? Where do we get our identity from? That's the next question, because it links up. We're coming to the point here. How is your identity formed? Where did you get your identity from? Now, most of you, as with me, we are shaped in the cradle. In the cradle already, our mothers are the first shapers of our identity. In the first months, and now even before birth, believe it or not, scientists are finding that even before birth, aspects of your personality is shaped in the womb. And so the identity of any person is the forming or the shaping of that identity starts even before birth, but is really fully shaped in the first maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years of your life. And in those 7, 8 years, your identity is shaped by your mom or by your parents and by the household and by those who are interacting with you, and they make you a atheist or a Muslim or a Christian or a white man or a black man or an Indian or whatever. You acquire the mind of an Indian, the mind of a Malay, the mind of a Westerner, the mind of an Easterner. That is grown, that identity is installed in you, let's say by year 8 of your life. But then other factors might start shaping or reshaping that identity. You might be conflicted with what you've experienced as a child, maybe due to, being a neglected child in the house, maybe being the product of a broken marriage, maybe being in a strange society where opposing ideas are conflicting with what you've learned in your house. And then you have the reshaping of identity. Now, how is identity formed? You see, identity is initially formed by your parents. You get it basically automatically. It is a process of simply adopting the identity that is imparted to you from your family. But the evolution of identities is a different process. The evolution or the transformation of identity is a different process. It's a process that is based on your experience and on your understanding. And so let me give you an example. If you if you have a person, right, that's you, then you are influenced by your parents, by the home. But then the process that really takes on the more powerful impact on your identity is what you know. Your knowledge. And so that will reshape your identity. Let's just quickly do a different identity. Now you have a slightly different identity. So we have no other, or knowledge. By knowledge I mean experience and what you acquire through other means. In other words, experience with reflexive experience plus reflection. That is really how knowledge comes about. And I remind you that I'm speaking here as an educationist, as somebody that has done a doctoral degree in education, and so I'm bringing the understanding that I have to bear on the topic that we have here in terms of the Muslim identity. So let's apply this. Right, experience and reflection. Those are really the two engines that drive the formation, that drive the acquisition of knowledge, which drives identity. Right, so those things will shape your identity. Knowledge and experience. Knowledge, which is born from experience and reflection. Let's quickly do another, and I hope you're still with me because it's extremely important. This will help you understand when you see people promoting certain ideas and thoughts, then you will be in a better position to understand and to analyze those people, or to make at least to have feeling more empowered. All right. So let us quickly stand still here by experience and reflection. There's a word for that in psychology or in social science. We call it the word that combines experience and reflection is reflexiveness. That word is a combination of reflecting on experience. And what that word relates to is the thought processes, the ideas that go through your mind, the thinking that goes on in your mind when you encounter an experience. That is called reflexiveness. So when you meet with a difficult situation, what happened to me this morning, your phone, you dive in the pool with a phone in your pocket. It's not a waterproof phone, unfortunately. And you just think, wow, man, what did I just do? And I climbed out of the pool and I looked at my phone and I thought, what do I do? So it's the experience that triggers a set of reflections in your mind. And now you're thinking, okay, but listen, I've watched a video one day where somebody said that if you put your phone in rice, it might fix the phone. And so you actually, that is what we call reflexivity or reflexiveness, is that you are now combining the experience with your own thinking, and obviously all of this is driven by a motivation. All of this is driven by a motivation. What is that motivation? That motivation is concern or interest. Right. So in summary, right? In summary, don't worry. I'm not gonna let you. I will. You will understand very, very clearly just now what I'm busy with. So to summarize, we have you. We have your reflexivity. We have your reflexivity, and that reflexivity determines your action or your behavior. And we, like I said, identity is who you are and how you will behave and how you will act in a certain way. That so we've got a few terms now here. We've got the word reflexivity, which is the thinking that occurs when you encounter the real world. Reflexivity gives rise to knowledge, and knowledge gives rise to your identity, and your identity is determines your behavior. So let me just put that in a nice string, and then you can understand it better, right? So we have knowledge, which creates identity, and identity creates behavior. Now, before knowledge, I said there is also some other factors, right? So knowledge creates your identity. What you know determines who you are. What you know determines who you are. And who you are determines how you will behave in this world. Right. Okay, are you with me still? Now, I have knowledge here. Reflexivity. So your reflexivity gives rise to your understanding or your knowledge. Your knowledge gives rise to your identity, and your identity gives rise to your behavior. Is that easy enough for you to understand? I'm sure you can understand this. Reflexivity, how you think when you encounter the world, the way you make sense of it, right? And that builds knowledge. Like I took the example of my phone fell I jumped into the pool with my phone in my pocket. I was worried and I was stressed about that, and that made me think, contemplate and worry, and it made me think, look, but I know if I try to put it in a bag of rice, it might switch on again, because it didn't want to switch on. And so that made me act in a certain way. Well, identity doesn't really come in there, but that formulated my behavior. My identity is about, I don't want to waste money. I don't want to lose that phone. I don't want to just, write off something that has value. I'm maybe in that sense frugal or concerned about conserving money. That's part of my identity. I don't want to give up. I don't give up easily. I want to fight and save so that's my identity there. That is why I am trying to save it. Right, now let's bring this whole thinking to religion, to Islam, and to worldviews, because now we're taking it to a completely different level. We're taking it to a completely different level, which is definitely not as simple as dropping a phone in the pool. You see, when individuals make decisions, that is called individual reflexivity. That is called individual or personal agency. When we act out of our own free will, it is called personal agency. Right? Agency is about deciding for yourself, impacting, affecting the world, making decisions, acting with effect in the world. That is what the word agency means. And we generally exercise our discretion, our agency, when we are confronted with a decision or with a challenge, then we have to make our minds up and do something. The Muslim person, the average Muslim, and let me take it from an individual level first. The average Muslim, for the past century or two, is facing a tough assault on his or her value system, on his or her identity. Right? So they have an identity. They've been taught in madrasa or in their homes that we are people who do this, that, and the other. You know, you pray every day 5 times. You don't, allow dogs to get too close to you. You go to the mosque. There's so many things. We fast one month a year. We have a certain way of dealing with older people, with our parents. We have a certain way of dressing ourselves, And so the identity of a Muslim is fairly well established for most of you. But what you experience, and it's not something new, this is an experience that is about 300 or 400, 500 years old, but let's bring it to today. What you experience is a conflict with those core aspects of your identity. So when you're in Pakistan or in parts of India, in Muslim villages in India, or you're in say Egypt or Nigeria, in a Muslim part of the country, or even here in where I am in the southern tip of Africa, when you find yourself in a Muslim community, in a Muslim clan or a Muslim village, it's not difficult to live or to project your identity. But it is once you engage with those who are hostile to that identity that the problem begins. When you go to university, when you go to high school, when you go to the workplace, or when you are doing business, or when you're dealing with other stakeholders in society, with your neighbors, etc., then suddenly you find your identity being contested. You find that those people are hostile, maybe not overtly, but definitely when you look at the media, you can see that there's hostility towards the identity. They are delegitimizing your identity. They are treating your identity as invalid or irrelevant or absurd. Right, so maybe they love having a pig for a pet, and in terms of your identity, that's not who you are. You don't keep pets in the house, and let alone in the yard, whatever. So the same with dogs sometimes. So you then find yourself in a process of reflexiveness. You now have to make sense of my own identity, the things I was taught when I was a baby or when I grew up, my parents, my family, my uncles, and the world out there that is hostile, that is questioning, and what creates more of a cognitive dissonance, is when those whom you regard as inferior to you, let's say you're a Muslim and you see people indulging in alcohol, illicit sex, and having pigs for pets, for heaven's sake, whatever. These practices that you find detestable, that you find abhorrent in terms of your own identity, when those same people are actually appear more successful, appear more prosperous, appear more good looking, for heavens, for what, whatever that may mean. So, or wealthier. So you might have a boss or somebody that is in a powerful position, very successful, big, beautiful house, but their practices, you find it sort of uncomfortable. You can't identify with those practices. And then we get what is called cognitive dissonance. Meanwhile, when you look back at yourself and you reflect on your own family back in India, back in Pakistan, back in wherever, Nigeria, you see you feel that inferiority when you consider them. When you observe them, you see, like for example, this earthquake now. When there's an earthquake in Australia or wherever, or in Greece next door to Turkey, you don't get a death rate of 5,000. You get a death rate of 500 because they just have better quality construction. And so this cognitive dissonance is about questioning yourself, your own worth, your own value, reflecting back at yourself, and then reflecting on those things that you find unacceptable, abhorrent, or offensive, the behavior, and not being able to make sense of it. Now that is, my friends, in brief, the melting pot where the modern Western Muslim identity is being shaped, and where you get the vibrance and the richness of ideas coming out. Because when people have conflicting thoughts and conflicting experiences, then the mind becomes very productive. Now, out of that melting pot, right, you have the emergence of several responses. You have the emergence of several ways of reflecting on those realities. One person, there are generally 4 ways in which people react when they end up in a very, very tough situation. They can't make sense of it. They have their values, they have their identity, but they are thrown into a difficult situation. Then there are 4 ways that they reflect reflexiveness. There are basically 4 forms of reflexiveness. 4 modes of reflexiveness. I'll call it modes. And I'm going to have to credit the person that has done amazing research in this field, and that is Margaret Archer. Please look her up, and you can try and find the books. She's written several books on this topic. So the modes of reflexiveness are the way in which Muslims will react to the hostile environment which they find themselves in. And that will make them come to certain conclusions. They will develop a new understanding, and they will recreate their own identity. Right. The first way in which people will reflect is possibly, I'm not going to use the technical terms. Avoidance. In other words, to evade the evasion. That's the first reaction people have when they find a tough situation and they are unable to make sense of it, and it's too difficult to deal with. They will consciously decide to take evasive action. And evasive action in the form of, let them be who they are and I will be who I am. And we will try to keep these existences, my life at work, my life at home, I will keep these two separate. That's a pigeonhole for that, for religion and my identity as a Muslim. At work, I will have the identity of a regular Western worker. And I won't use my identity that is at home there. In fact, that is probably the strategy, the coping strategy, or the reflexive response of 90% of Muslims, I think. 90% of Muslims believe that you can coexist, you can keep your religious business in the context of your family, and you can do the work and everything else in the context of your workplace. But now the question about that is, how do you raise your children? How do you determine what your core values are? And it becomes a difficult question because you have Western values, which is more materialistic, which is more impersonal, which is more selfish, and you have Muslim values, which are more communalistic, more selfless, you understand, which is drawn from the Qur'an. And so there is that ongoing conflict, and I think many people just find a point where they think, right, I'm Western enough and I'm Muslim enough at this point. And it is quite a tricky one. The second response would be to confront. To confront. So instead of avoiding, you confront the so-called hostile reality which you encounter. And that, I would say, would be some of the nativistic or nativist or going back to the fundamentalist ideas would be those fundamentalist type of harking back to first principles. And what that entails is just closing ranks and deciding to stand for what you believe in and to heck with what happens after that. Now, you probably know what I'm talking about. These are people that actually formulate movements to undermine or to to confront or to the reality, Western culture, Western reality, which they find is hostile to Islam. Or it could be anything else. It could be Hindu culture, which they find objectionable. So it's not particular to the West. It could be anything. It could be Chinese, the Han Chinese, the Uyghur Chinese, that could be formulating a movement against Chinese mainstream culture or against the Han culture. So that is to confront. And then, of course, there is to explore. So exploring means to engage. Explore doesn't mean to, it includes to engage. And that is the reflexivity. We're talking the modes of reflexiveness, where Muslims decide to actually do the tough thing and to sift through to do an audit of their own beliefs and to do an audit of the society that they find themselves in, and to do a quality control on both. You understand what I'm saying? To do a quality control on both strings or sets of ideas. And that is really what I think I fall into that category. And many of us, if you on this channel, probably you also in that category, is where you not simply delegitimize Western ideas or the culture or the ideas that you are being confronted with that you find difficult or hostile, but that you actually go and do a process of evaluation of those ideas, those values. But at the same time, you do an evaluation and an analysis and an audit of the things which you have been taught as a child in your own home, which you've learned in madrasa, which you've learned in school. And really this is the one where I am at. That is the one where I think I am at, right? So I have maybe been at times in the confrontational mode of reflexiveness. I might have been an avoider or an evader of the challenge and apply that kind of reflexiveness. But I think I would like to say that I feel comfortable being somebody who engages the culture or the environment that is different from my upbringing or my the way that I was taught by my family. Right. So that is those are the three main modes of reflexiveness. Now I'm coming to the Muslim identity. I'm still on the topic. It's not a quick answer, right? The fourth one, the fourth one would be what we call the passive reflexive, or the broken reflexive, or the fractured reflexive. There are many words to describe them, but those are the people that have been stunned into a state of inability to think. It's probably one of the toughest categories to be in. And those are the people that have, because of the overwhelming nature of the challenge, they have shut down. And there you will find your drug abusers, you will find your people with all sorts of mental challenges, you will find family violence, you will find just basically, it's a very, very difficult area, this one. This is the one where the human being has stopped functioning, has stopped making sense of the world. And they have basically stopped really functioning as an intellectual entity or as an emotional entity. And they don't make sense. They simply don't make sense. They are either catatonic, they don't speak, or they overspeak, or they become confusing, or I've heard once somebody use the word human wreckage. And the characters that are involved in suicide bombings and these bombings where they are walking into mosques and killing people in their prayer, you see, it's a very special person that has lost track of reality, that is completely acting outside the norms of normal human beings. Even the mass shooters in America, and I'm not absolving them from the criminality of their actions. Criminal behavior is criminal behavior. But in this one year, you'll get most of it will be criminal behavior. So, okay, or at least some measure of criminal behavior, but also other forms of psychopathy. Let's apply the four modes of reflectiveness on the Muslim mind today, and then you will be able to arrive at the type of movements and that will emerge. Now, the first one would be avoidance. Now, I would say if you go to London or to New York or to, South Africa, Johannesburg, any city that is reasonably acquired the Western norms and standards and appearance and feel, Australia also, New Zealand, even Europe, Paris, wherever, you will find that most Muslims have developed an avoidance posture. They consciously have decided to wear as much hijab as makes them acceptable in the secular workplace, as much as they can get away with. But there's a tension that exists, that remains, and that tension is because at the pulpit on Friday they are being drawn to a more stricter observance, but in the workplace and in the media and wherever else at school, they are being drawn away from that traditionalism. And so there's that tension there. And most Muslims exist in that tension. And it's not a nice place to be, I can tell you that. It's if you are one of those people, I do have actually quite a bit of sympathy with you, because it's not, you are at the mercy of the Maulana or the priest in the mosque, and then you're at the mercy of people at work again, and the general ideas, the general trends in society, popular trends. And if you go to Malaysia, you'll see like the Malaysians have become very, very skillful at being Westerners in Muslim clothes. And because Malaysia, similarly, they're confronted with a lot of Western ideas, big Chinese population, and those Chinese people in Malaysia are very pro-Western or very USA or America orientated. So the Malaysians are facing that tension, and it's not a nice place to be. I can tell you that it's not a very conducive or constructive way to be. But at least you found a means of. The other side is the confront category, and that is the category of the Muhammad Hijab and Daniel Hakikachu and all these people who make a living out of telling you that you should abandon and reject and jump ship and disown or delegitimize anything that is not in your traditional understanding and in your traditional books. And that would be at the head of this movement. You would find the Salafist movement, but you would also find other Islamic identitarian-based movements. Like there's a lot of Persian nationalism, there's a lot of Arab nationalism, there's a lot of that in here. And even in the Islamic Republic of Iran, whereas the movement started as a genuine movement that was confronting Western imperialism, it is so easy for that movement to become purely nativist, to become purely anti-Western or anti-change or xenophobic. Because this is really, I'm gonna, and I don't like using this, but there's a lot of xenophobia in the Muslim community where they simply hate people who are Western or white or different, acting in a different way because they are different. They're not evaluating, maybe to keep a dog is not evil. There's nothing that says it's wrong to keep a dog. But now suddenly they hate dogs because the Hadith said you need to not just be xenophobic, and there's a lot of xenophobia in that sort of second mode of reflexiveness. It is the explore and engage one that is a bit more complex, because there you will find different levels of engagement and exploring. Because at that level you will find people like us. But you see, the problem is if you explore and engage from the wrong place, if you explore and engage not to establish a healthy understanding, but simply to appease, to compromise, then you will find, some sort of very, very crazy and maverick ideas coming out of that one. So for example, now let me talk about the Qur'anist movement, because I think the Qur'anist movement is typically a movement that arose from this one here. You see, the Qur'anist movement. Okay, before I get to that, maybe I should just say that I'm not going to go much into the passive reflexive. Those are the people that have really lost a healthy and a sane outlook and understanding and are not functioning as rational human beings anymore, right? You can make of that what you like, but those are people that have lost their minds to some extent. They're not able to function. They're violent, they are irrational, and they don't make sense, and it's very difficult to get along with those people. But let us quickly look at the one here, because I believe the Qur'anist movement, what we call Qur'anist, and I remind you that I don't support the term, and I'm not really, but just because you are confronted with these people, I want to exploit for you. The Qur'anist movement is a movement that is reasonably contemporary. It started with the Ahlul Qur'an in Egypt, somewhere in the early, like already actually in the 18th, maybe 19th century, 1800s, with Muhammad Abdu, Jamaluddin Afghani. Early in the century, in the 1900s, there were Abu Alim Siddiqui. There were many people who kind of like shaped the foundations of what is now the modern trend and it's a global trend, we can't deny it, of Quranism, of Ahlul Quran, of denying or delegitimizing hadith completely. Of course, I always remind you that I'm not a Quranist, I'm a rationalist. I look at the merits of every argument. And if somebody comes and offers merits to a hadith, to a narrative, and provides the evidence and the strength of argument and corroborates it with other known knowledge or understanding, then I'm open to that. You see, I can't make a statement that there is no hadith, burn all the hadith books. That doesn't make sense to a rationalist. But now, okay, I will just go with the word Qur'anist for now. You see, the Qur'anists are also, and they are the ones that have decided to engage. They engage their traditional understanding, and they engage to some extent the West. Right? They engage the West. And they are trying to find an understanding or a new understanding that is the product of a thorough process of vetting or auditing ideas that emanate from Western culture and ideas which they have been taught as, in madrasa and so on. And I think Quranism is the bottom line of Quranism is that hadith has to be delegitimized, hadith has to be omitted. And because the Quran just simply does not offer the type of embarrassing knowledge and understandings that you will find in the hadith. You see, the hadith is replete with kill the black dogs, kill the Jews behind every stone, Moses, monkey stole Moses' clothes, the Prophet used to sleep with all his wives in one night with one ghusl. If you dream something evil, spit over your left. You see, the hadith just has so many embarrassing material and then also the whole foundation of hadith. Somebody said hadith is the word of Allah. Where in that whole string does Allah come in? Because hadith is the words of men. But then people say, no, but there's a science of rijal, or the science of vetting those men. But who are the people who conduct the science of rijal? It is other men. So hadith is a complete creation of ordinary people. There is no hadith book that is written by the Prophet ﷺ himself, Muhammad, or by any prophet. The only hadith book that is vouched for, verified, and written, yes, by the Prophet is the Holy Quran. So any other book is a creation of humanity, human beings, and it's their opinions and so on. So the Quranist idea, basic idea of Quranism is that hadith has no real sound foundations, and it doesn't have the merit of becoming a religious text. It is a text, but not a religious text. It has other value. I still have a conciliatory outlook to hadith, and I say, look, hadith has other value, but it doesn't have sacred value. You can't say that Abu Huraira's words that he claims are the Prophet's words are tantamount to the words of the Quran. You cannot say that. If you say that, you are in danger of making yourself a mushrik. So let's look at Quranism. Now, you see, people are driven by various concerns. I mentioned to you earlier that the engine, when people do reflexivity, they are driven by concerns. The engine is concerns, right? So the mind operate because of their concerns. Just don't overthink this. What I'm saying to you is that the reason you think and you ponder and you worry about stuff is because you are seeing a clash, you are seeing a difficulty. Like when I when I visit a friend, and I have some lovely friends who are not Muslim. I have one dear old colleague, and she's an old English speaking lady. Her grandfather is a British, grandparents are British people who settled in this country as missionaries. And I often visit her, and when I visit her, she has quite a few dogs. she has like 2 or 3 dogs, and they all around. And I love visiting her, but whenever I think of visiting her, I think, wow, but those dogs are they like to jump and lick and whatever. I like dogs. I mean, I play with dogs and so on. I don't know. I basically have a liking for pets and animals. But I don't really relish the idea of dogs jumping on me, licking my arms and so on. I don't really like it. It's part of my upbringing, I guess. Although religiously, I can't say. I have a problem with it in terms of maybe spreading germs, the saliva of the dog. So I tend to wash my hands before I leave a house. I will wash my hands before I leave my arms. The point is, when you encounter the prospect of something that is at odds with your norms, it makes you think, right? It makes you think, it makes you worry, it makes you concerned. And that is why I say concern drives reflexivity. So when I go to, I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to do this? Am I going to tell my friend, would you mind keeping the dogs on one side? That's going to be rude, right? She might not like that. Am I just going to be nasty with the dogs and say, go, 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 go? She might feel bad over that. And my own reflexivities led me to make the decision that, listen, to hell, the dogs must just lick me. I'm going to sit there and I'm just going to, because she's in a fairly good age, she's, I think, just in her 80s or something. And I just think for me to upset somebody that is old or that is frail, and we really have quite a bit of history. And I made the decision, listen, I'm just going to go there. The dogs will jump on me. They will lick my arms. I hope they won't lick my face, but I'm just going to deal with it. That's how. And what I'm saying to you is that my reflexivity, born from my concerns, has led me to a particular decision, or my behavior, or my action. So my behavior is, when she sees me, let's call her Jane. When Jane sees me, she's going to think Anwar is he's an amicable fellow. He's not difficult. He's not a Muslim fanatic. And we, as Muslims, we're always trying not to come across as being robust or fanatical about our beliefs. And I guess it's part of that, is that you're trying to present an image that is palatable to these people. And so I think that is how my concerns affect my reflexivity, and that reflects my action or my behavior. Now, coming back to the Qur'anist. There are some Qur'anists who just are too eager to please the Western or the dominant culture. And in the process, they are prepared to surrender too much of their own principles. So in other words, they do the due diligence, they do vet what they believe in, but they move beyond the point of what is reasonable. Now, for example, I'm going to make an example here. If anyone calls for the banning of hijab, I think they've compromised both ways. You see, they have now become more Western than the Westerner, and they have surrendered some aspects of Muslim culture that I don't think is in need of being compromised on. You know, dress code, if people want to wear a scarf as part of their dress code and appearance, if it's their identity, I don't see any reason why we should be challenging that. You see, you're being a bad liberal and you're being a bad Muslim. Because the liberal value would dictate that people are free to wear whatever they like, and the Muslim will dictate that to, you know, whatever that traditional Muslim person is basing his behavior on. So the problem with Quranism is that there is a tendency to either not do hard diligence in terms of vetting the value systems. And that is why my channel is here. Well, this is why I'm here. I look at every traditional belief in my deen, in my religion, in the way that I was brought up. And I evaluate it for validity. Now let's take the Taraweeh, for example. I've analyzed it and analyzed it and analyzed it and looked at it and tried to find a proof, even in Hadith, which I don't regard as sacred. But there are counter-indications to the whole practice of Taraweeh. So I cannot, in a Western society, because it has relevance here. You live in London or in wherever, in Sweden, in Stockholm or in Gothenburg. In Ramadan, the night is 4 hours or 3 hours long. There is no place for Taraweeh in those places, my friends. If you impose Taraweeh on these people, you are creating hardship. You are creating an Islam that is a burden on them. Some cities don't even have more than an hour of, so they fast 22 hours. And some can't even fast because the sun never really sets in summer. So how can you see, so in cases like that, I say you have to evaluate your own beliefs. And you have to see what is real and what is invented or what is fictitious. And that is the point of this. But there's also another problem here. So the one problem is due diligence. Right? Is that some people do not do the due diligence. The other problem is motives. If we are concerned, like the Qur'an says, and we are driven by taqwa. Taqwa means to be pious, to be restrained, to be cognizant of God, right? To have consideration for God, as I mentioned in the previous video. So taqwa means to be a person of consideration, considering God, considering the hereafter. Some people are not driven by taqwa in the Quranist movement, and that is that is the catalyst, my friends. The catalyst is we must have people who reflect and project a true concern for God, a true fear, a true consideration of God, of Allah, a true consideration, a true concern for the hereafter. A true concern, a true consideration for humanity and for the best interests of their people. And that is the problem. Some of these Quranists are in it for the wrong reasons, my friend. They are in it for the wrong reasons. So their identity becomes one-upmanship. It becomes one of trying to outsmart, outdo, outshine, whatever everyone else. The motive is clearly no longer to please Allah, to discover what is the right way, to uncover the truth. But it is now become a personal mission for publicity, for fame, to have a following, to create a following. And unfortunately, I'm not going to mention names. 3 people come to mind offhand. I leave that to you to guess who those people are. Because normally people who are driven by the wrong reasons form cults. They form cults. They form movements that are based on their own personal whims and fancies. And the other one is somebody that becomes contrarians. Basically, they make a career out of objection, out of objecting, out of splitting and hair splitting. That is the other example of where these things fail, is when you're trying to start new religions and you're starting to hate on existing Muslims, then you have lost the way, because now your motive is no longer to concern for humanity, concern for God, concern for the year after, but it has become now an act of vindictiveness, a vendetta. And we cannot be driven by vendettas. We don't hate others, we love them, and that is the point. And then still another people are there, just on the ego trips. They are there for the ego, and that is why they become Qur'anists, because it's a new idea. They can fly with us, they can create a following, and this could bring them, and it does bring them, maybe tens of thousands of YouTube followers. But there's another group here that I want to actually mention, and that is the ex-Muslims, because the ex-Muslim is somebody that has also done the due diligence, but have decided that Islam as a whole is invalid, and that even the Qur'an is invalid. So, though not under Qur'anism, but the identity of an ex-Muslim. And it's a very peculiar identity, because it is an identity, you see. An ex-Muslim is an identity. So I've given you identities that are real, and I've given, and those identities are the confused or conflicted Muslim who go along, the crazy Muslim, the thinking Muslim, the discerning Muslim. But then you also get the ex-Muslim. The ex-Muslim. The ex-Muslim, I don't even know why. You see, it's very important to them to use the term ex-Muslim. If they don't give themselves the title ex-Muslim, they don't have an identity, you see. Because when an ex-Muslim or somebody that has abandoned or relinquished his Islam lives in a non-Muslim society, is always still seen as a Muslim. I have a friend who's an ex-Muslim, but his name and his surname unfortunately hasn't changed, the name and the surname. And also because of having a reasonably Eastern appearance, he's a Muslim. Non-Muslims look at him as a Muslim. They treat him like a Muslim. They want to feed him halal food. They make assumptions about him, and he has to present himself to them as an ex-Muslim. You see, your identity as a Westerner simply does not fly. You see, so that is why you get the phenomenon, strange phenomenon of an ex-Muslim. So let me summarize to you quickly. It's time to summarize. In summary, what I've told you, what I've shared with you, is that human beings are the product of their upbringing, of their parents, of their mom, of their close family, of their clan, of their tribe, initially. And then they become the product or the person that is created by their knowledge, their understanding. That is what I said. That understanding, that knowledge, shapes who they are. It shapes who they are. And what they are is what they stand for, what they view as important, what they will fight for, what they will not fight for. That is who they are. And that identity is shaped by their understanding of the world. Now, that understanding of the world is impacted on by their experience with the real world, coupled with their reflection. So when they live in the real world and they reflect upon the encounters with the real world, whether they get insulted, they get stigmatized, they get delegitimized, they get mocked, if the human being in that encounter becomes reflexive and develops an understanding and a knowledge. Some of them develop a knowledge and an understanding which is based on a complete, the word is evasion of the problem. So they become your quietist Muslims, your pigeonholed Muslims, your split personality Muslim. The split personality Muslim the majority, 90% of them are today sitting and trying to just make both sides happy. So they're trying to make their workplace happy, and they're making the Maulana and the Imam and the priest happy, and their parents happy. So you might find a woman might, wear hijab at Muslim functions, but at work she doesn't wear it. So they have these dichotomous, these split personalities, which I think is very silly. What are your children going to do? What are you teaching your children? If you are just doing a superficial attachment to both, what will you teach your children? And I can tell you what will happen to your children. Your children will not have a Muslim identity. There you go. There you go. I've given you that warning. Those 90% of you who think that you can find a nice compromise, your children will not be Muslim. They will, in the next generation, they will become strangers to the Muslim way, and in the following generation, there will be nothing left. Those of you who are living in the West. The other one is those who confront senselessly, who become nativist, who go just all out traditional. They go and confront the negative or the culture of the West or whatever. They will get nowhere with that, because they're up against the 90% Muslims, and they're up against those who defend Western culture. So good luck to those of you who think Daniel Hakikachu and Muhammad Hijab and all these other ISIS types in the Muslim world, that those movements are doomed. They will never survive. Even with sadness I say this, if Iran doesn't change their ways, then they are not going to get anywhere. If they think purely in nativist terms, if they purely think in confronting the West and not doing an audit of their own ideas. If you just simply believe Shiism is it, and there's no compromise, and we've got the perfect package here, and we're going to steamroller this idea onto the world, it won't work. It won't work. The third type is, like I said, that those who are prepared to engage to an audit of what the mainstream culture is teaching and what they have been taught, their tradition, their traditional upbringing, and to make a conscious decision or to arrive at certain clear knowledge positions. And that is the position that I've advanced. And that is the idea of scholars that are today looking at the West ideas, traditional Western European ideas, and Muslim ideas, and trying to synthesize a worldview that is anchored in the divine and yet incorporate some of the most constructive or the constructive ideas that are captured within the West. Like, for example, the idea of the method of scientific research, which has a powerful approach to knowledge, which the West did not invent, but which they have championed for 500 years, and which we can comfortably say that we need to adopt that in our worldview. So those are the three, and then of course the fourth one I mentioned was the reflexive, that is actually lost their minds, that have become dysfunctional in their thinking. And these are the pieces of human wreckage that are all over the place, that are men that have become catatonic, or men that have become extremely violent, criminals, and we have these crime problems in the Muslim world even. A lot of the ISIS recruitees are actually part of these people, because they're not thinking people, they just simply function sort of in a very, very animalistic way. So I think I've shared with you the types of thinking, and when you now look at anyone trying to sell you a bill of goods, I want you to specifically look at those who are prepared to evaluate thoroughly the Islamic ideas, and evaluate thoroughly the Western ideas, and to do that evaluation from a place of taqwa, not from a place of one-upmanship or self-hatred or vindictiveness or egoism, but make very sure that people who come to you with an idea are actually coming to you with a driven by a concern for God, a concern for the year after, and it must come out in their words. If people don't remind you of God, then they have probably missed the point. If people don't remind you constantly of taqwa, of the year after, if it's a Muslim scholar and he's not reminding you of the year after, reminding you of God, reminding you of your responsibility to society, then that guy is most probably on some stray path, and he's looking at taking you with him there. So it's been a lengthy talk, my dear friends. I've tried to put you in the picture with not just the Muslim idea, but Muslim ideas, but also with how you confront these issues and how you make sense of it. I hope I've kept some of you listening throughout, and may Allah guide you, may Allah guide me, and make us resilient and capable and competent to navigate through the difficult world in which you live. And when I speak to you, I know I'm speaking to somebody in Malaysia, I'm speaking to you in India, I'm speaking to you in America, I'm speaking to you in Britain, in the UK, I'm speaking to you in South Africa, maybe Australia to a lesser extent. And this message is particular to us, that this is how we navigate our way. We have a very, very strong mission, my friends. Those categories, those geographical regions that I've just listed, we have a very special mission. I don't want you to underestimate your mission. There's about 100 million of us, I think, maybe more if you add India. There's maybe, 200 million of us. And we have a very special mission. We have a mission of not just freeing the West from their destruction or of guiding them, but also our own legacy or our own traditional world from the destructive path that they are on. And there's only like 100 million of us or whatever. And from that 100 million, I think there could be a 100,000 that shares these things, these thoughts. Hopefully more will come on board. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. May Allah bless you. May Allah bless all of us and guide us.